Well, my name is Dr. Michelle Zeibots and I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Technology, Sydney, and I specialise in strategic transport planning. I'm also the 2024 Engineers Australia Transport Medal winner, and I've been a senior lecturer at UTS for about 15 years, and I've had the great privilege of teaching many of the young engineers that have gone and made a practical difference to rail and transport networks in Sydney and other parts of Australia where they've gone out and practiced. What's special about Lithgow in my eyes is that it's an industrial town, a very industrial town that is also incredibly creative and innovative, and not a lot of people see it in that way. I think most people from outside of Lithgow, and possibly a lot of us inside here at Lithgow as well, we see ourselves as a coal mining town. But if you look back at the history of Lithgow, you'll see numerous innovations, and they're industrial innovations, they're inventions, but they're also social institutions that have been created in Lithgow as well. So if you were to if you could press the rewind button on the tape recorder of history and replay the history of Lithgow without coal mining, I think people would be surprised at the extraordinary things that have happened here and that we would find. Well, the Lithgow Locomotive Workshop has been a very big part of Lithgow's history. It's been a very big part of that history of innovation. And the railway workshop was significant because it was the place where the electrified rail line stopped and the non-electrified rail line that supports the New South Wales Central West begins. So that was a point where there was a great deal of change and maintenance and a whole range of other things that needed to happen. So what used to happen was that diesel locomotives pulling freight would come into Lithgow, and then they would change over to electric locomotives to take their freight down to Sydney. And the reason why they would do that is because the overhead power was there, and electrifying freight is a lot cheaper and more efficient to run than diesel run freight. So the federal government has released its net zero roadmap and action plan for the transport sector. And the big deal for rail is that they want to see battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell trials carried out in numerous locations across Australia between 2026 and 2030. And I think one of the few places in the country that could manufacture those trials while at the same time satisfy the policy to make sure that all rail manufacturing is 50% or more Australian made, one of the few places where that could actually be pulled off successfully is here in Lithgow. If you combine that with the fact that Lithgow also has a skilled workforce, it's got railway engineers here that are extraordinary. For example, the only battery electric passenger train that has ever been built in Australia and is now operating in Australia it was invented and it was manufactured here in Lithgow. That's not a coincidence. And I think that that's indicative of the creativity that is inherent within the Lithgow community workforce. And so if we can shift gear and think about electrifying freight, which we can do, and groups like Meta Australia and Elderton Engineering are in a very good position to be able to provide that battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell technology for freight and passenger rail. If we go down that path, then we can take advantage of this factor in the electricity grid that we now have called curtailment. And curtailment refers to the amount of electricity that's coming off our renewable grids or our renewable arrays, that is our solar and wind. So there's an enormous abundance of energy that is now available in the middle of the day that could go into batteries to run things like freight and a whole raft of other things. But transport is an area where we could swap a very expensive, unstable, and I would say politically and ideologically unsavoury energy source, oil, We can swap that for domestically produced electricity that comes from renewable sources and is extremely good for our economy and balance of trade and absolutely excellent for the environment. So we can either pay lots of money for imported diesel, or the choice that we have right now, today, is we can swap that out for this electricity that's called curtailment, which is the electricity that we're not using, and it's ideal for putting into batteries and harvesting for transport needs. What I would definitely say is that I think Lithgow has a very big part to play in shoring up the security of Australian supply chains by providing the technology and the conversions of existing freight locomotives to battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell propulsion systems. And with freight, an obvious trial site would be to convert an existing diesel-powered freight locomotive to battery electric propulsion. So this is why, if we go back to what I was saying earlier, once again, if you look at the history of Lithgow, it's a place that's actually very innovative. And I think now is the time for us to revisit that spirit of innovation that is actually still very, very strong in Lithgow, and enable the rest of the country to benefit from it. But, as a supply region, Lithgow still has that ability to do these wonderful and innovative things, and I think the next chapter in that is the advent of a net zero rail manufacturing precinct, which is unashamedly about doing the right thing by the environment, but most of all, in my view, it's about shoring up the country's economy and shoring up our security on energy, and doing it in a way that is going to bring about loads of benefits, not just for people in Lithgow, there's jobs, but for people in Sydney and anyone who lives near a rail line who can now enjoy or look forward to a future whereby there are less emissions and, most importantly, a lot less noise in the middle of the night when those freight trains are running past your door.